Oh boy. Sorry if I sound very wheezy when I cough. Went for a run. I am so unfit. I haven't run in so long because of quarantine. The first time for a run just around the block. Oh boy. Anyway, chapter 16 of Tom Sawyer, eh? Tuesday afternoon came and waned to the twilight. The village of St. Petersburg still mourned. Public prayers had been offered up for the lost children, but still no good news came from the cave. The majority of searchers had gone back to their daily vocations, saying that it was plain that their children could never be found. Mrs. Thatcher was ill. Aunt Polly had drooped into a settled melancholy, and her grey hair had grown almost white. The village went to its rest on Tuesday night, sad and forlorn. Away in the middle of the night, a wild peal burst from the village bells, and in a moment the streets were swarming with half-clad people who shouted, turn out, they're found." Tin pans and horns were added to the din, and the population moved towards the river, met the children coming in an open carriage, thronged around it, joined its homeward march, and swept magnificently up the main street, roaring huzzah after huzzah. The village was illuminated. Nobody went to bed again. It was the greatest night the little town had ever seen. A procession of villagers filed through Judge Thatcher's house, seized and kissed the saved ones, squeezed Mrs. Thatcher's hand, tried to speak but couldn't, and drifted out, raining tears all over the place. Aunt Polly's happiness was complete, and Mrs. Thatcher's nearly so. It wouldn't be complete, however, as soon as the messenger dispatched with great news to the cave. Should the word get to the cave, should get the word to her husband. Tom lay upon the sofa with an eager auditory about him and told the history of the adventure, putting in many striking additions to adorn it withal, and closed with a description of how he left Becky and went on exploring expedition, how he followed two avenues as far as his kite line would reach, how he followed a third to the fullest stretch of the kite line, and was about to turn back when he glimpsed a far-off speck that looked like daylight, dropped the line and groped toward it, pushed his hand and shoulders through the small hole, and saw the broad Mississippi rolling by. And how, if it had only happened to be night, he would not have seen that speck of daylight or explored the passage any more. He told how he went back for Becky, and how they pushed their way out at the hole, how they sat there and cried for gladness, and how some men had come along in a skiff, and Tom hailed them. How the men didn't believe the wild tale at first, because, said they, you're 5 miles down the river below the valley the cave is in. Then took them abroad, rowed them to a house, gave them supper, made them rest, and brought them home. Before day dawn, Judge Thatcher and a handful of searchers with him were tracked out in the cave. By the twine clues they had strung behind them, and informed of the news. 3 days and nights of toil and hunger in the cave were not to be shaken off at once, as Tom and Becky soon discovered. They were bedridden all of Wednesday and Thursday, and seemed to grow more tired and worn all the time. Tom got about a little on Thursday, was downtown Friday, and nearly as whole as ever Saturday. But Becky did not leave her room until Sunday, and then she looked as if she had passed through a wasting illness. Tom learned of Huck's sickness and went to see him on Friday, but could not be admitted into the bedroom. Neither could he on Saturday. He was admitted after that, but was warned to keep still about his adventure and not introduce and introduced no exciting topic. The widow Douglas stayed by to see that he obeyed. At home, Tom learned of the Cardiff Hill event, and also that the ragged man's body had been found in the river near the ferry landing. He had been drowned while trying to escape, perhaps. About a fortnight after Tom's rescue from the cave, he stopped at Judge Thatcher's house to see Becky. The judge had some friends there, and someone asked Tom ironically if he wouldn't like to go to the cave again. Tom said he thought he wouldn't mind. The judge said, "Well, there are others like you, Tom, but we have taken care of that. No one will get lost in that cave anymore." "Why?" "Because I had its big door sheathed with a boiler iron 2 weeks ago, and triple locked. I've got the keys. And I've got the keys." Tom turned as white as a sheet. "What's the matter, boy? Here, somebody, fetch water." Water was brought and thrown into Tom's face. "Ah, now you're all right. What's the matter with you, Tom?" "Oh, Judge, Injun Joe's in that cave." Within a few minutes, the news had spread, and a dozen skiff loads of men were on their way to McDougal's cave. Tom Sawyer was in the skiff that bore Judge Thatcher. When the cave door was unlocked, a sorrowful sight presented itself. Injun Joe lay stretched upon the ground, dead, with his face close to the crack in the door, as if his longing eyes had been fixed on to the latest moment, and upon the light of the free world outside. Tom was touched, for he knew by his own experience how this wretch had suffered, but nevertheless he felt an abounding sense of relief and security now, which revealed to him how vast a weight of dread had been laying upon him since the day he lifted since the day he lifted his voice against this bloody-minded outcast. Injun Joe was buried near the mouth of the cave, and people flocked there from all towns and farms for miles around, and they confessed that they had almost as satisfactory a time at the funeral as they could have had at the hanging. The morning after the funeral, Tom took Huck to a private place. Huck had grown plenty strong now to hear exciting talk. He had learned all about Tom's adventure from the Welshman and the widow Douglas by this time, but Tom said he reckoned there was one more thing they had not told him. Huck's face saddened. He said, "I know what it is. You got into number 2 and never found anything but whiskey. I just knowed it must have been you, and I knowed you hadn't got the money, because if you had, you'd got at me some way or another and told me. Tom, something's always told me we'd never get hold of that swag." "Why, Huck, I never on that. I never told on that tavern keeper. You know his tavern was all right the Saturday I went to the picnic. Don't you remember you was to watch there that night?" "Oh, yes. It was that very night that I followed Injun Joe to the widow's." "You followed him?" "Yes, but keep you mum. I reckon Injun Joe's left friends behind him, and I don't want him doing me mean tricks." Then Huck told his entire adventure in confidence to Tom, who had only heard of the Welshman's part of it before. "Well," said Huck presently, "nobody nipped the whiskey in number 2. Whoever nipped the whiskey in number 2 nipped the money too, I reckon. Huck, that money wasn't ever in number 2. "What?" Huck searched his comrade's face. "Tom, have you got on the track of the money again?" "Huck, it's in the cave." Huck's eyes blazed. "Tom, honest Injun. Now, is it fun or earnest?" "Earnest, Huck." "Will you go in there with me and get it?" "If I will if it's where we can blaze our way to it and not get lost." "Huck, we can do that with the least little trouble. Are you strong enough now to go right now? Are you strong enough to go right now?" "Is it far in the cave, Tom? I bet on my pins a little 3 days now, but I don't think I could walk more than a mile. It's about 5 miles into there, the way anybody but me would go. Huck. But there's a mighty shortcut that they don't anybody but me know about. Huck, I'll take you right to it in a skiff. Let's start right off, Tom. All right. We want some bread and meat and a bag or two, and two or three kite strings, and some of these newfangled things they call Lucifer matches. I tell you, many is the time I wished I had some when I was in there before. A trifle afternoon, the boys borrowed a small skiff from a citizen who was absent and got underway. When they were several miles below Cave Hollow, Tom said, "Now you see this bluff here looks all alike all the way down from the hollow. No houses, bushes all alike. But do you see that white place up yonder where there's been a landslide? Well, that's one of my marks. We'll get ashore now." They landed. "Now, Huck, where we're standing, you could touch that hole I got out of with a fishing pole. See if you can find it." Huck searched and found nothing. Tom proudly marched into a clump of sumac and said, "Here you are. Look at it, Huck. It's the snuggest hole in this country. You just keep mum about it. All along I've been wanting to be a robber, but I knew I'd got to have a thing like this, and where to run across it was the bother. We've got it now, and we'll keep it quiet. Only we'll let Joe Harper and Ben Rogers in, because, of course, there's got to be a gang, or there wouldn't be any style about it. Tom Sawyer's gang. It sounds splendid, doesn't it, Huck?" "Well, it just does, Tom. It's real bully. I believe it's better than to be a pirate. Yes, it's better in some ways, because it's close to home and circuses and all that." By this time, everything was ready, and the boys entered the hole. Tom was in the lead. They toiled to the farther end of the tunnel, then made their spliced kite strings fast and moved on. A few steps brought them to the spring, and Tom felt a shudder quiver all through him. He showed Huck the fragment of candlewick perched on a lump of clay against the wall, and described how he and Becky had watched the flame struggle and expire. The boys began to quiet down to whispers now, for the stillness and gloom of the place oppressed their spirits. They went on and presently followed Tom's other corridor until they reached the jumping off place. The candles revealed the fact that it was not really a precipice, but only a steep clay hill 20 feet high. Tom whispered, "Now, I'll show you something." He held his candle aloft. "Look as far around the corner as you can. There, see? On the big rock over yonder. Done with the candle smoke. Tom, it's a cross. Now, where's your number two?" "Where's your number two?" "Under the cross, hey? Right yonder is where I saw Injun Joe poke up his candle, Huck." Huck stared at the mystic sign a while, and then said with a shaky voice, "Tom, let's get out of here." "What? And leave the treasure?" "Yes, leave it. Injun Joe's ghost is around here, certain." "No, it ain't, Huck. It would haunt the place where he died." "No, Tom, it wouldn't. It would hang around the money." Misgivings gathered in Tom's mind, but presently an idea occurred to him. "Looky here, Huck. Injun Joe's ghost ain't a going to come around where there's a cross." The point was well taken. It had its effect. "Tom, I didn't think of that. But that's so. I reckon we'll climb down there and have a hunt for that box." Tom went first, cutting rude steps in the clay hill as he descended. Huck followed. 4 avenues opened up, out of the small cavern where the great rock stood. The boys examined 3 of them with no result. They found a small recess in the one nearest the base of the rock, with a pallet of blankets in it, also an old suspender, and the well-gnawed bones of 2 or 3 fowl. But there was no money box. Tom said, "He said under the cross." "Well, this comes nearest to being under the cross. It can't be under the rock itself, because that sets solid on the ground." They searched everywhere once more, and then sat down, discouraged. By and by, Tom said, "Looky here, Huck. There's footprints and some candle grease on the clay about one side of this rock, but not on the other sides. Now, what's that for? I bet you the money is under the rock. I'm gonna dig in the clay." "That ain't no bad notion, Tom," said Huck. Tom's real barrow was out at once, and he had dug not 4 inches before he struck wood. "Hey, Huck, you hear that?" Huck began to dig and scratch now. Some boards were soon uncovered and removed. They had concealed a natural chasm which led under the rock. Tom got into this and held out his candle. He could not see the end of the rift. He stooped and passed under with Huck at his heels. The narrow way descended gradually. Then Tom turned a short curve and exclaimed, "My goodness, Huck! Looky here." It was the treasure box, sure enough, occupying a snug little cavern along with an empty powder keg, a couple of guns in leather cases, 2 or 3 pairs of old moccasins, a belt, and some other rubbish well soaked with the water drip. "Got it at last," said Huck, plowing among the tarnished coins with his hands. "My, but we're rich, Tom." "Huck, I always reckoned we'd get it. It's just too good to believe. We have got it, sure. Say, let's not fool around here. Let's snake it out. Let me see if I can lift the box." It weighed about 50 pounds. Tom could lift it, but could not carry it. "I thought so," he said. "They carried it like it was heavy that day at the haunted house. I reckon I was right to fetch the bags along." The money was soon in the bags, and the boys took it up to the cross rock. "Now let's fetch the guns and things." "No, Huck, leave them here. There. They're just the tricks to when we go to robbing. We'll keep them there, and we'll hold out orgies there too. It's an awful snug place for orgies." "What orgies?" "I don't know, but robbers always have. But robbers always have orgies. Come along, Huck. It's getting late. I'm hungry. We'll eat in the skiff." They presently emerged into the clump of sumac, looked warily out, found the coast clear, and were soon launching in the skiff. As the sun dripped towards the horizon, they got under way. Tom skimmed up the shore through the long twilight, chatting cheerily with Huck, and landed shortly after dark. "Now, Huck," said Tom, "we'll hide the money in the loft of the window's woodshed, and I'll come up in the morning, and we'll count it and divide. And then we'll hunt up a place out in the woods for it where it will be safe. Just you lay quiet here and watch the stuff till I run and hook Benny Taylor's little wagon. I won't be gone a minute." He presently returned with the wagon and put the sacks into it, threw some old rags on top of them, and started off, dragging his cargo behind him. When the boys reached the Welshman's house, the Welshman stepped out and said, "Hello? Who's that?" "Huck and Tom Sawyer." "Good. Come along with me, boys. You're keeping everyone waiting. Here, hurry up. Trot ahead. I'll hold the wagon." "Why, it's not as light as it might be. Got bricks in it? Or old metal?" "Old metal," said Tom. "I judge so. The boys in this town will fool away more time hunting up 6 bats worth of old iron to sell to the foundry than they would to make twice the money at regular work. But that's human nature. Hurry along, hurry along." Huck wanted to know what the hurry was about. Never mind, you'll see when we get to the widow Douglas's. A little later, Huck found himself pushed, along with Tom, into Mrs. Douglas's drawing room. Mr. Jones, the Welshman, left the wagon near the door and followed. The place was Hey, Snowy. Yeah. Reading cat. Never mind. You'll see when we get to the widow Douglas's. A little later, Huck found himself pushed, along with Tom, into Mrs. Douglas's drawing room. Mr. Jones, the Welshman, left the wagon near the door and followed. The place was grandly lighted, and everybody that was of any consequence in the village was there. The Thatchers were there, the Harpers, the Rogerses, Aunt Polly, Sid, Mary, the minister, and a great many more, and all dressed in their best. The widow received the boys as heartily as anyone could well receive two such good-looking beings. They were covered with clay and candle grease. Aunt Polly blushed crimson with humiliation and frowned at Tom. Nobody suffered half as much as the boys did, however. Mrs. Jones said, Tom wasn't at home yet, so I gave him up. But I stumbled on him and Huck right at my door, and so I just brought them along. You did just right, said the widow. Come with me, boys. She took them to a bedchamber and said, Now wash and dress yourselves. Here are 2 new suits of clothes, shirts, socks, and everything. They're They're Huck's. No thanks, Huck. Mr. Jones bought one and I the other. But they'll fit you, both of you. Get into them. We'll wait. Come down when you are slicked up enough. Then she left, and Huck said, Tom, we can slope if we can find the rope. The window ain't high from the ground. Shucks, what do you want to slope for? Well, I ain't used to that kind of crowd. I ain't going down there, Tom. Oh, bother, it ain't anything. I'll take care of you. Sid appeared. Tom, said he, Auntie has been waiting for you all afternoon. Say, ain't this greasing clay on your clothes? Now, Mr. Siddy, you just tend to your own business. What's all this blowout about anyway? Well, it's one of the widow's parties that she's always having. This time it's for the Welshman and his sons, on account of the scrape they helped her out of. And say, I can tell you something, if you want to know. Well, what? Why, old Mr. Jones is going to try to spring something on the people here tonight. But I overheard him tell Auntie today about how it as a secret. But I reckon it's not much of a secret now. Everybody knows, the widow too, for all she tries to let on she don't. Mr. Jones was bound Huck should be here too. Couldn't get along with his grand secret without Huck, you know? Secret about what? Huck said. About Huck tracking the robbers to the widows, I reckon. Mr. Jones was going to make a grand time over his surprise, but I bet you it will drop pretty flat. Sid chuckled in a contented way. Sid, was it you who told? Oh, never mind who it was. Somebody told. That's enough. Sid, there's only one person in this town mean enough to do that, and that's you. You can't do anything but mean things, and you can't bear to see anyone praised for doing good ones. Then, no thanks, as the widow says. And Tom cuffed Sid's ears and helped him to the door with several kicks. Now go and tell Auntie if you dare. Some minutes later, the widow's guests were at the supper table, and a dozen children were propped up little side tables in the same room, after the fashion of that country and that day. At the proper time, Mrs. Jones made his little speech, in which he thanked the widow for the honor she was doing himself and his sons, but said that there was another person whose modesty, and so forth and so on. He sprung his little secret about Huck's share in the adventure in a fine dramatic manner, but the surprise occasion was largely counterfeit. However, the widow made it a pretty fair show of astonishment, and heaped so many compliments upon Huck that he almost forgot the nearly intolerable discomfort of his new clothes intolerable in the entirely intolerable discomfort that of the entirely intolerable tongue twisters. Of his clothes in the entirely intolerable discomfort of being set up as a target for everyone's gaze and laudations. The widow said she meant to give Huck a home under her roof and would have him educated, and that when she could spare the money, she would start him in business. Tom's chance was come. He said, Huck don't need it. Huck's rich. Nothing but a heavy strain upon the good manners of the company kept back the proper complimentary laugh at this pleasant joke. But the silence was a little awkward. Tom broke it. Oh, you needn't smile. I reckon I can show you. You just wait. Tom ran out the doors. Company looked at each other and looked inquiringly at Huck, who was tongue-tied. Sid, what ails Tom? Said Aunt Polly. I never... Tom entered, struggling with the weight of his sacks, and said Aunt Polly did not need to finish her sentence. And Aunt Polly did not need to finish her sentence. Tom poured the mess of yellow coin upon the table and said, There, what did I tell you? Half of it's Huck's, half of it's mine. All gazed. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then there was a unanimous call for explanation. Tom said he could furnish it, and he did. The tale was long, but brimful of interest. There was no interruption to break the charm of its flow. And when he had finished, Mr. Jones said, I thought I had fixed up a little surprise for this occasion, but that don't amount to anything now. This one makes it sing mighty small, I'll allow. The money was counted. The sum amounted to over $12,000. Damn. And that is chapter 16. Hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the what do you call it? Debut, the feature of Reading Cat as well. Study Cat. Yee. Snowy says hi. Bye bye.